We are here at the Gunning House at 7495 East Broad Street in Reynoldsburg, and we're talking to David Vottero and Kathy Mast Kane. And Kathy is the Executive Director of the Columbus Landmarks Foundation, the organization which nominated the Gunning House to the 2009 list of Ohio's most endangered historic sites. But before we talk to Kathy, David, I'd like to ask you just in general if you'd share some information about the architects of the Gunning House and their relationship to one of the best known figures in American architectural history.
Sure. The designers for the house were Tony Smith, Lawrence Cuneo, and Ted Van Fossen. And Tony Smith and Lawrence Cuneo were both Taliesin associates. They were apprentices with Wright for several years. And this is Tony Smith's first work after leaving the apprenticeship. So the original house dates back to 1940, and it's one of the most important works in the early part of Tony's career. Tony went on to have a very successful career in architecture and an even more successful career as a working artist. So his accomplishments as an artist and Ted Van Fossen's accomplishments as an architect lead this to be kind of a house that has a pretty complex but a pretty interesting pedigree.
And just as an aside here, David, you yourself are an architect with Schooley Caldwell, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm the Director of Design for Schooley Caldwell Associates.
Very good. And in addition to the writing and influences that you mentioned, David, could you just share a little bit about when the house was constructed and who it was constructed for?
The house was built over several stages. The first stage began in 1940. That's the original part of the house was built in 1940. It was built for the Gunnings. The Gunning family was an interesting sort of typical sort of client that Wright or early progressive people might have. Robert Gunning was a writer. His expertise was in technical writing, and he invented the fog index, which is an index for measuring the readability of writing. And he was known internationally for his technical writing ability and made a good living for himself and his family.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And now, Kathy, could you share with us a little about Columbus Landmarks Foundation's interest in the property, why you think it merits attention and hopefully long-term preservation?
Sure. Well, we just learned about the property approximately 6 months ago, about November of last year. And when it was brought to our attention at that time, it had been on the market for a good 3 years. And significantly, it had been vacant as well for at least 2, significantly continuing to deteriorate from weatherization, decay, and also some vandalism. And so when it was brought to our attention again, we learned what we could from experts like David, who had immersed himself in it, and recognized it just as a stellar artifact of mid-century modern residential architecture. The more we learned then about Tony Smith and his success as a sculptor, his children and the Tony Smith estate have since visited the property. We sought them out and brought them in. And it turns out to be really one of Tony Smith's first initiatives in architecture and the kind of the beginning of Wrightian influence here in Ohio. Since that time, we have posted an alert to our constituencies. We've put it up on the web. We've contacted statewide and national organizations. It's also listed on the Cultural Landscapes, a national organization, Cultural Landscape Foundation. It's a national organization promoting cultural landscapes, because much of what is significant about his house is not just the house itself, but its setting and the entire landscape and the acreage that goes along with it and its orientation to the ravine. And so it has received not only local but statewide and national attention, but time is of the essence. It is clearly, like I said, it's been on the market for over 3 years. It's necessary for the owner to move on, and we need to find a buyer immediately.
And as we close, could either of you share just a brief observation on what you may consider the importance of Columbus and Franklin County looking at examples of post-World War II, or this is actually a little before that, but let's call it recent past architecture? Do you think that there are important parts of Columbus that merit preservation but might be a little bit newer than the traditional Victorian houses, et cetera, that are typically the focus of preservation efforts? Is there an effort to survey and to identify these important pieces of Columbus architecture, and is an important process.
It's a critical process. It's clearly very not well documented, and I think this house has brought to our attention that I think there are many of these gems dispersed throughout the Franklin County area that have not been recorded or documented, and I've talked to the realtor that hopefully we will preserve the Gunning House, but if not, we will also have a network of people who care about recent past architecture and properties, and that we could create an affinity group or a contingent of folks who are interested in helping us do further and additional documentation of properties of this like kind.
Very good. Well, thank you, David and Kathy, for your time today.